Montana Territory, 1885. The sprawling plains stretched beyond imagination, dotted with cattle and the occasional weathered homestead. For 20-year-old Ruby Gardner, the vast expanse of Big Sky country represented neither beauty nor opportunity, but merely the latest backdrop to her endless struggle for survival. Ruby wiped her brow with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of flour across her forehead. Her auburn hair, normally pinned neatly in a practical bun, had come loose during the morning's baking, with tendrils framing her face in the stifling heat of the cookhouse. Her blue calico dress, once vibrant but now faded from countless washings, was protected by a stained apron that had seen better days. Feed them, but keep your distance, she reminded herself, a mantra formed through hard experience. The frontier takes more than it gives, and a woman alone is just another resource to be claimed. The Flying J Ranch employed 20 cowboys, each one with an appetite that matched the boundless Montana sky. Ruby had secured the position as cook after fleeing Denver with little more than the clothes on her back and the memory of a father who had gambled away their future before typhoid took him. At 20, Ruby had already learned that attachment meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant pain. "Miss Gardner, these biscuits could charm the rattles off a snake," declared Hank, the weather trail boss, as he collected his morning meal. The other cowboys muttered their agreement, their eyes lingering on Ruby a moment too long for comfort. "Just doing my job, Mr. Peterson," she replied curtly, keeping her eyes on the ladle as she served the next man. "There's coffee on the stove." Ruby had survived by keeping men at arm's length. In her experience, they fell into two categories: those who wanted something from her body and those who wanted something from her labor. Either way, she was a commodity, not a companion. The frontier had taught her that romance was a luxury afforded to those with security, something she had never known. What Ruby truly wanted was her own place, a small homestead where she answered to no one but herself. She had been saving diligently, hiding away every spare penny in a tin beneath her bunk in the small room attached to the cookhouse. In her darkest moments, she admitted to herself what she actually needed: connection, belonging, a hand to hold when the Montana winters howled against the walls. But such thoughts were dangerous indulgences. The cook wagon bell rang, signaling the arrival of new hands. The Flying J was expanding its operation, and Hank had ridden to the nearest town to recruit additional cowboys for the upcoming cattle drive. Ruby straightened her apron and prepared more plates, steeling herself against the prospect of more hungry men with wandering eyes. The door swung open, letting in a burst of fresh spring air and 3 trail-dusted figures. 2 were older men with weather-beaten faces that had seen countless cattle drives. The third, however, caught Ruby's attention despite her best efforts to remain indifferent. He removed his hat, revealing thick chestnut hair and eyes the color of a summer sky. His face, though tanned from outdoor work, lacked the hardened creases of frontier bitterness. He couldn't have been more than 25, with an earnest smile that seemed genuine rather than predatory. "Ma'am," he said with a slight bow of his head. "Something sure smells wonderful in here." "Food's on the table," Ruby responded flatly, turning back to her pots. "Help yourself." "Chase Forrester, at your service," he continued, undeterred by her coolness. "Just signed on as wrangler." Ruby gave a curt nod without meeting his gaze. "Ruby Gardner. I cook. That's all you need to know." As the days passed, Ruby found Chase Forrester different from the other cowboys. While most ate quickly and left, he lingered, offering to help with the heavy water buckets or wood for the stove. He spoke of books he'd read and places he'd seen, treating her not as a servant, but as a person worthy of conversation. One evening, as Ruby was preparing dough for the next day's bread, disaster struck. A sudden gust of wind caught the cookhouse door, slamming it open and sending her carefully arranged stack of plates crashing to the floor. The precious china, her responsibility, lay in fragments at her feet. "No, no, no," she whispered, dropping to her knees. 3 months' wages, at least, to replace them. Her dreams of independence slipping further away with each broken piece. The door creaked open, and Chase entered, immediately taking in the situation. Without a word, he knelt beside her, carefully gathering the larger fragments. "Don't touch them," Ruby snapped, embarrassment fueling her anger. This is my problem. My mother always said that any burden shared is halved, Chase replied calmly. And any joy shared is doubled. Ruby's hands stilled. Your mother sounds like she lived somewhere far from the Montana territory. Pennsylvania, he confirmed. But truth is truth, no matter where you stake your claim. As they worked together to salvage what they could, Chase shared a story of his own failure. A horse he'd misjudged and lost during a river crossing in Wyoming. His vulnerability, freely offered without expectation, cracked something in Ruby's carefully constructed walls. Ranch owner's going to take this from my wages, she admitted quietly. Not if it was an accident, Chase insisted. And not if we can mend some. I've got steady hands for fine work. The next morning, Ruby was stunned to find Chase had spoken to the ranch owner and taken responsibility for the accident, claiming he had bumped into the shelves while retrieving coffee. More surprising still was the small wooden box he presented to her later that day, containing plates he had purchased from the general store on his own account. Why would you do that? Ruby demanded, suspicion overwhelming gratitude. What do you want from me? Chase's expression remained gentle. Not everyone has an angle, Miss Gardner. Sometimes people just want to help. Ruby's world, built on the certainty that survival required isolation, began to shift on its foundation. The false belief that had protected her now felt like a prison of her own making. As spring ripened into summer, the ranch prepared for the long cattle drive to the railhead. Ruby worked from dawn until well past dusk, preparing provisions and packing the chuck wagon. Chase continued his quiet attentions, bringing her wildflowers he found on the range, sharing stories of his family back east, listening to her rare mentions of her own past without judgment. On the eve of the cattle drive's departure, Ruby found herself making a special apple pie, Chase's favorite, though she told herself it was merely practical to use the fruits before they spoiled. You'll be careful out there, she said as she handed him an extra wrapped package of ginger snaps. The Milk River crossing can be treacherous this time of year. Chase's smile warmed his eyes. Why, Miss Gardner, anyone might think you cared. Ruby's cheeks flushed. I just don't want to have to break in a new Wrangler. He laughed, the sound genuine and unguarded. I'll come back. You can count on that. 3 weeks into the cattle drive, disaster struck. A sudden thunderstorm spooked the herd, causing a stampede that injured 2 cowboys and sent the chuck wagon careening into a ravine. When the remains of the party returned to the Flying J 2 days later, Ruby's heart stopped at the sight of Chase's horse being led riderless among the group. He went back for Billy when the boy got thrown, Hank explained, his voice hollow. Last we saw, they were headed west, trying to outrun the storm. Search party found the boy's body near the river, but no sign of Chase. The wall Ruby had built around her heart cracked like the parched Montana earth during drought. The pain of loss, of something that had barely begun, threatened to overwhelm her carefully maintained defenses. That night, for the first time since her father's death, Ruby Gardner cried herself to sleep. Life at the Flying J continued. Ruby cooked, cleaned, and saved her wages, but the light had gone from her eyes. The jokes she had occasionally shared with Chase were replaced by efficient silence. The cookbook he had gifted her, a treasured possession from his mother, remained unopened in her trunk. 2 months after the cattle drive, Ruby was kneading bread dough when the cookhouse door swung open. Expecting one of the ranch hands coming for coffee, she didn't look up. I hear you make the best apple pie in 3 territories. The voice, hoarse but unmistakable, froze Ruby in place. Slowly, she raised her eyes to see Chase Forrester leaning against the doorframe. Thinner, with a healing scar along his jaw, but undeniably alive. They said you were dead, she whispered, flour-covered hands gripping the table for support. Nearly was, he admitted. Got swept downriver, picked up by a band of crow. Took me weeks to heal enough to travel. His eyes never left hers. But I made a promise to come back. In that moment, something fundamental shifted in Ruby's understanding of the world. The frontier that had taught her only isolation and caution had also delivered this man back to her against impossible odds. You look like you could use a good meal, she managed, though her voice trembled. Chase stepped closer. What I need, Ruby Gardner, is to stop pretending. Pretending what? She asked, heart hammering against her ribs. That I came back for the Flying J. That I ride out each day thinking about cattle and horses. He took another step. I came back for you. I think about you. Every day I was healing, every mile I rode home. Ruby's carefully constructed beliefs about survival and independence collided with the undeniable truth standing before her. That connection wasn't always a weakness to be feared. That sometimes, against all frontier logic, it was a strength. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted, vulnerability raw in her voice. "I've been alone so long." "We'll figure it out together," Chase promised. Day by day, as summer turned to fall, Ruby and Chase's cautious friendship blossomed into something deeper. She continued cooking for the ranch hands, but her evenings belonged to Chase. Walks along the creek, stories shared by lamplight, lessons in riding and roping that left her breathless with laughter. Just as Ruby began to believe in the possibility of happiness, the past she had fled in Denver arrived at the Flying J in the form of Edward Pullman, her father's former business partner, and the man from whom she had escaped a forced marriage. Well, Pullman drawled, his expensive Eastern suit out of place in the ranch cookhouse. "Ruby Gardner, your father promised you to me before his untimely death, and I always collect what I'm owed." Terror washed over Ruby as the life she had carefully built threatened to collapse. Pullman presented forged documents claiming Ruby's father had indentured her services to settle gambling debts, documents that, in the barely governed Montana territory, would be difficult to disprove. "She's not going anywhere," Chase declared, standing protectively at Ruby's side when Pullman returned with the local marshal. "This isn't your concern, cowboy," Pullman sneered. "The law's on my side." The situation reached a breaking point when Pullman attempted to force Ruby into his waiting carriage. In the struggle, he revealed his true nature by striking her across the face. Chase's reaction was immediate. He tackled Pullman to the ground, but in the ensuing fight, Pullman drew a hidden derringer. A shot rang out across the ranch yard, and Ruby screamed as Chase fell to the ground, blood blossoming across his shirt. In that terrible moment, Ruby's fear transformed into something fiercer. Drawing the small pistol she kept hidden in her apron pocket, a precaution from her Denver days, she aimed it steadily at Pullman. "Step away from him," she commanded, her voice unwavering despite the tears streaming down her face. "I won't let you take anything else from me." The ranch hands, drawn by the commotion, surrounded Pullman. The marshal, witnessing Pullman's violence firsthand, questioned the validity of the supposed debt papers. When two cowboys recognized Pullman as a notorious confidence man wanted in Wyoming territory, his scheme unraveled completely. As Pullman was led away in handcuffs, Ruby fell to her knees beside Chase. The bullet had torn through his shoulder, painful but not fatal. As she cradled his head in her lap, the last of her protective walls crumbled. "You could have been killed," she whispered, stroking his hair. Chase's eyes, though clouded with pain, found hers. "Some things are worth the risk, Ruby Gardner." During Chase's recovery, Ruby faced the truth her heart had known for months, that the independence she had sought for so long paled in comparison to the connection she had found. The frontier hadn't beaten love out of her after all. It had merely been waiting for the right moment to show her its possibility. One evening, as autumn painted the distant mountains gold and crimson, Chase led Ruby to a small rise overlooking the ranch. His shoulder was healing well, though he still wore a sling beneath his jacket. "I've been saving too," he confessed, gesturing to a stretch of land that bordered the Flying J. 160 acres under the Homestead Act. Good water, decent grazing. Ruby's breath caught in her throat. "Your own ranch." "Our own ranch," he corrected gently, taking her hand. "If you want it." He dropped to one knee, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his healing wound. From his pocket, he withdrew a simple gold band. "Ruby Gardner, you've been cooking for Cowboys just to survive." His voice was husky with emotion. "I'm asking you to cook just for me, forever. Will you marry me?" In that moment, Ruby saw not just Chase but the future they could build together. A home filled with warmth instead of weariness, strength found in partnership rather than isolation, love that didn't diminish but fortified. "Yes," she whispered, and then louder, "Yes." The wedding took place that December in the ranch's main house, decorated with pine boughs and ribbon for the occasion. Ruby wore a new blue dress, her auburn hair crowned with white winterberries. Chase, handsome in his best shirt and waistcoat, watched her walk toward him with undisguised adoration. By spring, Their small cabin on the newly named Forrester Ranch was taking shape. Ruby planted a vegetable garden, while Chase built corrals for the small herd of horses he was breeding. At night, they sat on their porch, watching the stars emerge over the Montana wilderness. "Do you ever miss it?" Chase asked one evening. "The independence you were saving for?" Ruby considered the question, her hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly where their child was growing. "I haven't lost independence," she realized aloud. "I've gained partnership. There's freedom in knowing someone stands with you, not over you." As the last light faded from the western sky, Ruby Gardner Forrester understood the frontier's final lesson. It wasn't merely a place of harshness and loss, as she had once believed. It was also a place where love could take root in the most unlikely soil, where a woman who cooked for cowboys just to survive could find a man who asked her to cook just for him, forever. And in that forever, she had found not just survival, but home.